Hello. Yep, it looks like we're recording. So, welcome to this ACT Matrix webinar. My name is Sue Knight. I've been using this model for a number of years, so I thought it would be useful to kind of share it as much as possible. So, today we're going to do what we do every week is to go through one loop of the matrix, possibly two, and then I will share with you an activity that I have done in groups in the field of addiction. I have been a recovery worker for about 15 years. Good morning, James. Hello. We've got a chat box on the side, so if you'd like to say hello, there's a few people here with us live, and then this gets recorded. And other people watch it in the future. So if you have to leave early, or if you're at work and something comes up and you want to watch it again or catch up on the stuff that you've missed, then you can always watch this over. There are other recordings that I've done. I think there's about 3 or 4 on there that you can watch back as well. So if you struggle to find them, I've got a website which is recovery.co.uk, and it should all be on there. So the chat is, if you have any questions as I go along, I'll try my best to answer them. Also, if you're willing to get involved and participate, that's really helpful for me. Trying to do group work when you're not kind of with physical in the physical world, you're in the virtual world, is something that I'm getting used to. I've always done it in actual groups with people sat in front of me. So the best way to learn is to do it. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Bear with me a minute. Okay. So, are you willing to get involved in a model or a point of view? I get that there are many models and points of view which work within the field of addiction. This is one of them. It's not the only one. So this is a point of view. So for those that are live with me, are you willing to get involved and participate? I think the only way to learn and to teach this is if it's interactive. So if you're willing, that would be great if you could just put yes. Thank you, James. Great. Okay, so thank you, Anders. Okay, so what we have here is the matrix. It is a very simple grid, which with clients all you need is a pen and piece of paper and you can draw it out. It's as simple as that. I've generally done it on a huge whiteboard behind me, and now I'm doing it kind of with a whiteboard in the virtual world. So it starts on the lower right hand side, and it's the simple question of who is important to you. And I'll start. So my sons are important to me, and if anybody else has anything that they would like to share in the chat. So Anders, his wife, thank you. Daughter, yeah. People often write pet, colleagues, kids. Colleagues, I never know how to spell that, never mind. Kids, thank you. Friends, community. Okay, so that's how we start. It's as simple as that. Who is important to you? In kind of other explorations of the lower right hand side, people will also ask what's important to you, but I find that who's important, generally people will always be able to find somebody that is important to them. When it comes to the what's important, it becomes a bit more challenging to identify something. So it's always useful to start with who's important. And also, you may from time to time come across somebody who, especially when they're first stepping into the path of recovery or onto the path of recovery, and you'll ask them, who's important to you, and they may really struggle. And even then, just asking the question, is it important to you, to rediscover who or what is important to you? And they would generally say yes, because they wouldn't have walked in to a recovery service if they didn't want to. Okay, so then we go over to the lower left and we introduce what we call the yucky stuff, or not wants, which are our thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations that we do not want. So, as many examples as possible would be super helpful. Always starting off with fear and anxiety and stress. Yeah, stress. Just move this up a little bit. Stress. Yes, rejection, absolutely. Nobody wants to feel rejected, or to have the thought that they've been rejected. And then there's the internal narratives, the thoughts. We call them stories. And when I say story, I think it's really important to emphasize that doesn't mean that it's made up, but the mind is basically one big story machine. It churns them out constantly. So, am I good enough? Yeah, thank you. Other stuff like feeling sad. So thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations that you do not want to have, that you would want to get rid of in some way. So feeling disapproved of is one of mine that I notice fairly regularly. Inadequate. I don't know how to spell half of these words. Inadequate. Yes. Shame and guilt. And perhaps, there's loads that, the list can go on and on and on, especially if you've got a group with a load of people. The list will be long. Yes, I will never be able to change. Absolutely, I will never be able to change. And resentment, yeah, resentments. Okay, feeling nervous, anger, yeah, embarrassment or embarrassed, bored. Lots of people come into services. It's a kind of boredom is a big thing. Yeah. Okay. So you get the general idea. Isolation. So feeling isolated or feeling alone. Isolated, alone, lonely. Yeah. Okay, that's a great list. So you get the idea of what a not one or the yucky stuff is that shows up for us in our internal world. So it might be worth introducing that below the line, this stuff, the yucky stuff, is our internal world. It's the world of the mind, and it's kind of inside of us. The thoughts, the stories, the narratives that we have about who or what's important to us, how that feels. And then above the line, let me try and move that so that becomes a bit clearer, is the world of the senses. So our behaviour happens in the outer world. So what we look at now is we ask people for the top left, what behaviours, so this is important, behaviours have you done that you've noticed in the last week or so that have moved you away from this yucky stuff, or that have you've been able to get relief from that yucky stuff. So me, for example, it's kind, you know, those kind of typical avoidance behaviours, and examples of those can be like cancelling an appointment. That brought up lots of kind of stress to me. Cancelling an appointment. A referral, yes. So getting referred. So asking for help. A referral to drug treatment. Overeating, yeah. And then the obvious kind of ones, I guess, for as we're working with people in treatment is drinking, using drugs. You know, nobody's gonna deny that using drugs and drinking doesn't give relief from that yucky stuff. It's one of the primary reasons that people use them. Okay, move that over a bit. Let's do another box. Oh my gosh, technology, wow. Okay, don't worry about that one. This one's smaller. There we go. Okay, so some other working, yes, so working like crazy. Lying, yeah. Overcommitting. And then, you know, kind of other stuff that people do to find relief from their yucky stuff or their not once. You know, people get stressed, don't they? They go running, exercising, disrespectful communication, yeah. So, disrespectful communication. What else if we keep it general as well, what else do kind of people do to find relief from their, eating, from their not once, eating, shopping, spending, gaming, zoning out. You know, for me, zoning out includes binging on Netflix. I'm in the middle of Top Boy at the moment, and I'm just zoning right into that, loving it. Yeah, so going on holiday, and even the kind of build up to that stuff, you know, like the planning of it, which is really interesting to see how we can find relief from our internal stuff by distracting ourselves, by planning and researching. You know, I did it with a pair of shoes once where I researched and planned and fantasized about buying these shoes for like a month. It was a lot of time spent, and you could potentially say wasted, on these shoes. Okay, so on this side, we'll do some arrows which indicate what's happening. So when yucky stuff shows up, stress, we find behaviours to get relief. Some of them are helpful, some of them are not so helpful. And that it's not about making any one behaviour the enemy. It's starting to notice how these behaviours impact on our lives and whether they're helpful or not. And what can happen, and this is where addiction starts or progresses to, is that we get caught in what we call these loops. And then eventually, as time goes on, it starts to spiral. And an individual will become a specialist in one or two fixes. And so then their life starts to revolve around their fix. And it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so what happens is the yucky stuff keeps coming up. In the short term, a behaviour in the top right will help to find relief, but in the long term it creates more suffering. We're all doing it. We're not everybody is necessarily addicted to drugs or alcohol, but there are a lot of people out there. But we're all addicted, in my opinion, I think we're all addicted to something. And these things here, phones, are designed for exactly that. And if you're going to notice anything, notice when that urge to pick up your phone, and I wonder what it would be like 1 in every 4 times that urge to pick up and check your phone, just to see what's showing up for you. What is it that you're wanting to move away from, if that is the case? Just to get curious and interested in how these kind of habits are influencing us, how they're impacting our lives. Just to get interested, not to change it, not to fix it, not to solve it, just to notice it. So does that make sense? The left-hand part of the matrix is where addiction can happen. The right-hand part is much more difficult to get addicted on the right-hand part. So we'll go to the top right. And up here, we ask people what behaviours move you closer or towards the people who are important to you, the people that you care about. So me, for example, listening to my son and watching him today in his Easter bonnet parade. It was like the cutest thing ever, watching son's Easter parade. So has anybody got any examples of any behaviours that they've noticed recently that have moved them towards those that are important to them, that they would like to share? It can be the simplest of things. Going to the gym. Yes. Going to the gym together. Thank you. Kissing my wife. Kissing my wife in the morning. Yeah. Meditating. Yeah. Meditating. Staying connected in meetings or in the community. Okay, great, thank you. So another great list with some spelling mistakes. So on this side, we invite people to see what it feels like to do stuff which moves you closer to those that you care about. So on the right hand side, there's a sense of kind of satisfaction with this stuff. On the left hand side, there's a sense of relief. So when we're doing relief moves or away moves, it makes sense that they would become more addictive because it sticks. The memory of something taking away pain and suffering sticks. Whereas the memory of something being much more satisfying, joyful, they call it appetitive. It's like the away memories are like Velcro, it sticks, but the towards stuff is like Teflon, it just slips away. And when you're noticing this stuff, it's so helpful to dwell in the right hand side as well. Because the more you dwell in that appetitive stuff, the stuff that's satisfying, it's not about the outcome, but the fact that you've done something which is moving you towards those people that are important to you. It comes from the heart. It's much more meaningful, but it's got a different quality to it. So all you're asking individuals to do when you do this grid with them is to notice what it feels like to do towards moves and to notice what it feels like to do away moves. And when people leave the session or the group, all you need to say is, do you think it's possible to notice the different areas of the matrix? So do you think it's possible to notice when you're in your mind and you're thinking about and feeling about the people that are important to you? Is it possible to notice when the yucky stuff shows up? Is it possible to notice what behaviours you do in response to the yucky stuff? And is it possible to notice what behaviours you do which move you towards? And just to get people interested and curious, because the goodness is in the noticing. It's not about necessarily goals or outcomes or achievements. It's about bigging up the noticing, because in the noticing, it gives people the opportunity to choose more skillful behaviours, because it's not in your mind that you change your life. It's not the below the line stuff that matters as much. It's important, but it's not as important as what you do, because it's what you do that counts. And if you think about people in treatment services, it's what they do that keeps them stuck, because all of this below the line stuff is an inevitable part of being a human being. And what happens is that we get so stuck in our minds, because our minds are a powerful, powerful thing. This little bit down here, we get stuck down here below the line. And what the matrix invites people to do is to shift above the line into your senses. So reawakening to your sensory world and being in your life as your life is happening, like noticing what you're seeing, noticing what you're hearing, noticing kind of like the surface of your body, that sense of touch. And when you're eating, kind of being with that, really being with your moment to moment experience is so helpful in then, with practice, and it grows, this noticing muscle, it grows and it grows and it grows, people become more skillful in being able to unhook from the yucky stuff. And so this is a really important term in the matrix, is what happens down here in the lower left is that we get hooked, or it's called fusion in ACT terminology. So we basically get stuck to our thoughts, or we get stuck in our minds. And to be able to shift from below the line and notice when we're below the line and stuck there into the sensory world, it creates space around the stories that we get stuck with. So does that make sense as a kind of brief overview? Well, I don't think it was that brief actually. It was quite, it was 20 minutes or so. Okay, great. So thank you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look a bit more in depth at this term stories and hooks by doing a very short kind of visualization practice. So is everybody willing to get involved? It's only a couple of minutes. If your environment isn't really conducive to it, then you can always come back to the recording and replay it when you've got a bit of space. Right, let me stop sharing this then for now. Okay, right, so I'll keep referring back to the matrix. So if you've got a kind of visual image of it in your head, it's useful. If not, if you've got a pen and piece of paper, if you just write it out, that'll also be useful. So what we're going to do is something called the lemon exercise. Is anybody familiar with the lemon exercise? No? Okay, great. I love introducing new stuff to people. So it's a mindfulness-ish exercise. It's a noticing exercise. So what I'm going to invite you to do is to find a comfortable position in your seat and close your eyes if you're willing to. If you're not, this doesn't really work that well if you've got your eyes open, but you might be able to. You can always come back to it, like I said. So what I'm going to invite you to do is just to close your eyes and spend a few moments just noticing your breath. So noticing your in-breath, noticing your out-breath. Notice how your body responds to your breathing, perhaps how your rib cage and your lungs expand and contract. So just noticing, there's no right or wrong. This is really important. You cannot get this stuff wrong, which is the beauty of this model. So now what I invite you to do is to turn your hands so that your palms are facing upwards, resting the back of your hands on your lap. And next I'm going to invite you to imagine that you're holding a plate. A big white plate, and sitting on your plate is a big, ripe, juicy lemon. And in your mind's eye, observe the lemon. So noticing its colour, its texture, its shape. Is it a regular shaped lemon, or does its colour vary? And next, rest your plate on your knees and pick up the lemon with your hands. So noticing the feel of the skin against your fingertips or your palms. So how does the skin feel? Is it cool or is it warm? Has it got that waxy surface? And try squeezing the lemon. Is it soft or firm? And passing the lemon from one hand to the other and feeling its weight. And next, bringing the lemon towards your face and smelling it. Does it have a smell? And now putting the lemon back on the plate and imagining a knife lying next to it. So picking up this knife and cutting the lemon in half. Can you smell anything new? So feeling the texture of the lemon as the knife cuts through it and hearing the sound of the knife slicing it in half. And allowing the two halves of the lemon to fall apart on the plate and putting the knife down. And then noticing the inside of the lemon, its segments, its colour, and any smell that is coming from it now it's been cut. And now picking up one half of the lemon from your plate and bring it towards your mouth. And if you are willing, and when you are ready, take a big bite of the lemon. And finally, when you are ready, put the piece of lemon back on the plate and put the plate to one side. And now bring your attention back to your breathing, the in-breaths and the out-breaths. And feeling your feet on the floor. And prepare to bring yourself back into your room. And when you're ready, opening your eyes. Okay. So in the chat, if you're willing to share, what did you notice? There's no right or wrong, kind of literally what did you notice? Okay, so specifically, if you're willing to share, what kind of stuff did you notice about the lemon? The feel of it, right? The colours, yeah. What about when you bit the lemon? Not some resistance, so not wanting to taste it, yes. And the imagery, the actual kind of like image of, or the picture of cutting it in half, yeah. So the feel of it, the colour of it, seeing the colour of it, some resistance to wanting to taste it. I love that, thanks Jay. And the picture of cutting it in half, great. And so when you did bite it, what else did you notice? Yeah, kind of feeling the juice on your fingers. So much to notice. And often when this is done in a group, quite a few of the participants in the group will actually start to salivate as well. And also, you know, that kind of wincing or bittery, lemony thing that happens. Yeah, like that kind of, ooh, that, yeah, right. So that kind of facial expression, how you can see yourself and your face going, ooh. Isn't it interesting? Like there's actually can be a physical reaction to something that is predominantly just a story that I told you. So with the use of language, which is why language is, you know, something that we kind of really need to get curious about in terms of how we relate to the stories that our mind churns out, we can have a literal physical reaction. We can see the actual lemon in our mind's eye when there isn't any lemons anywhere. Well, I'm assuming, I don't know, there might be some. You might be in your kitchen and there might be one over there. But in terms of this exercise, there isn't any actual real lemons. It's all the lemon of the mind, the story of the lemon, and then the physical reaction as if the lemon was really there, which is fascinating. It's I find it so interesting, the literal kind of salivating and kind of resistance and wincing to the mind. This is how powerful the mind is. So that is a very simple exercise that I've done many times with clients, and then it leads on to starting to explore with people what other kind of stories do they notice that their mind churns up, where they have a physical reaction to it, where they literally notice an internal experience. And we can often start with phobias, you know, like I hate rodents. Like even now I can feel it. Like I can feel my shoulders starting to rise up. My hands are like, no, I can't. Mice or rats, even, just, they are horrible. Like my whole body just wants to curl up. Oh, horrible. So has anybody else got any phobias? And if they're willing to share in the chat, what do they notice at even the thought of that? Whether it be, I don't know, heights, yes. Even the thought of going high, I wonder what you notice when you think about that. Yes, feeling it, yes. Roller coasters, right. Yeah. So, these are other kind of like examples to help clients to get interested. Oh, isn't that interesting? You cannot say that enough with clients. Oh, isn't that interesting that you notice that in your body? Isn't that interesting that that story shows up for you in your mind, that you're noticing? And reinforcing the noticing, like really bigging up the noticing, because often with client work, somebody might come in and say, oh, I'm really anxious or I'm really stressed, and somebody and the worker will be like, oh no, oh, what can I do to help? How can we get rid of it for you? Potentially, I'm just making an assumption that that's what a recovery worker might do. But it throws people when you come in and they say, oh, I'm really anxious. And it's like, wow, great. What are you noticing about that? Let's kind of like get curious around how does that show up for you? What thoughts show up for you when you notice anxiety? And it's a kind of exploration with people, an inquiry, you could call it. Yeah, so another really useful exercise which I do to follow on from the lemon exercise is, let me share my screen again. Is this one. So simple. Again, all you need, pen, piece of paper. You don't need to do the emojis with it. Just inviting people, what stories may they have noticed recently that hook them in? Because usually when we're hooked into stories, away behaviours or relief moves are much more likely to happen. So, anybody got any that they are willing to share? I can share one of mine first. So, a story that I've noticed shows up for me a lot, actually. It's a very familiar one for me, is that I'm not trying hard enough. I need to do better. I need to do better. And then what we've got up here is what feelings show up. So that lemon, the lemon effect they call it. So the lemon effect of what do I notice in my body when I'm hooked into my mind, and my mind telling me that I'm not trying hard enough. And often what I notice is fear of failing, which shows up in my body as a tightness in my chest and like a butterflies in my stomach. And then what do I do when this shows up? So this part is the behaviour, is I overwork. And I research. I ruminate and I plan and I research, and I can do it kind of fairly obsessively, you could say. So overwork, research, and ruminate. So go over stuff again and again and again and again. So does that make sense, those three columns? So what's the hook? What's the story in the mind? What's the internal experience in the body? So we call that the lemon effect, which is a bit like the wincing or when I told the story about the lemon. And then what's the behaviour? What do you do in response to that? Okay, so has anybody got any examples that they would like to share? Oh, I see there's, so fear of failure Anders, thank you. And when that, oh, fear of Anders, fear of failure, sorry, Anders, fear of failure. And then what shows up, what's the lemon effect when that shows up for you, if you're willing to share? Butterflies, lovely, thank you. And then what do you do? That you've noticed. What's the behaviour? Withdraw, yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so James, so the story or the hook is not doing what I commit to. Okay, not doing what I commit to. So getting caught up in the mind, and the mind saying, having the thought that you're not doing what you commit to, and then when your mind says that, what shows up with you, for you in terms of the lemon effect? What feelings do you notice? In the stressed and anxious, yes, great, thank you. And then what do you do in response to that? If you're willing to share. Oh, the behaviour is up there as well, isn't it? Like overthinking and dwelling on important things. Yes, okay, so withdraw again. And then it's interesting, isn't it? Because it feeds into getting hooked again, like you say, and then you get angry, which is kind of the hook. So there's a thought or a feeling that shows up that we get stuck to. And this is where looping starts or happens. It's so interesting to notice it. So if I can stop sharing this and go back to the matrix. Thank you for your examples. It's really helpful. Go back to the matrix. So this is where can you see how looping happens? So say, like with your example, James, so say, you know, stress and anxiety shows up. So then you withdraw. And when you withdraw, then you get angry. So you loop back round again. And then there'll be something else that you do. So we get caught in these loops. And we're all doing it. Everybody's doing it. The skill, or if there is a goal of any of this stuff, is to notice and then to reawaken into the senses, into the sensory world. Because what can happen is we can loop below the line as well, which is a bit more advanced stuff. I don't want to kind of confuse anybody. But we can loop in our minds as well. So I am very, very, very skilled at looping in my mind. So fear will show up, so I start planning. Then I get really tired and stressed, so I become more fearful that I haven't planned. So then I ruminate, so I get caught up in my mind. So really, really hooked. And then it's like, okay, so noticing and shifting above the line doesn't take it away. It's not about stopping this stuff, but when you shift above the line, there's more room for acceptance, more room for allowing it, more room for meeting it with a bit more kindness. Because, you know, I notice in my experience over the years, I can give myself a really hard time for all of this stuff. And especially, you know, I've been practicing this stuff for years, and I started thinking, when I started practicing this stuff, I'm going to get rid of all my difficult stuff, you know, all my yucky stuff, I'm going to get rid of it all. That's what I thought acceptance was. 12 years later, all the stuff I had 12 years ago, I've still got it now, but I'm just better at being with it. It doesn't stop it. It doesn't get rid of it. You just get better at being with it. And that's what acceptance is. Acceptance is, I prefer the word allowing. Allowing our difficult internal human experience to be with us, and then to notice what's useful, what's helpful, and what's not. And accepting this stuff, and then committing to doing life expanding behaviors, which is the stuff on the right hand side. The stuff which gives us a sense of satisfaction, but is far less addictive. So you're far less likely to do it. And just to notice that that's how we are a lot of the time, and not to give ourselves a hard time. And you can kind of do percentages as well. You can look at percentage wise throughout my day, how often am I on the towards side and how often am I on the away side. And the likelihood is that you will be doing away behaviours far more than you will be doing towards behaviours, and that is normal. This is the most important thing to remember. That is normal. So what we're inviting people who have stepped into recovery services to do is, the likelihood is that their lives will be way out of balance. They will be doing far, far, far more, or predominantly all away behaviours, and completely stuck. And so it's starting to kind of rebalance it a bit, and inviting and exploring and discovering with the client what behaviours might they be willing to commit to, which lead them towards the life that they want. And when they are doing small, incremental, manageable things, their life will slowly start to grow, and they will notice what it feels like to do that towards stuff, that satisfaction stuff, and they'll get an appetite for more, potentially. But as workers, it's for us to go on this kind of journey of discovering what is individual to them, what is important to them, which is completely individual. It's not for us as well. I'm going to stop sharing now. It's not for us as workers to dictate to them what should be important, because you're basically kind of telling somebody how to live their life. And I know for me, when somebody tries to tell me what I should be doing or what should be important to me, I just shut down. So there's an element of, you can give people options. You can say, well, perhaps this might be helpful. I wonder what it might be like to go and maybe check out a yoga class, or go and go shopping, or write a shopping list, or anything, any behaviour. And another key thing of doing this model with clients is, it's not about whether, if they commit to a behaviour and they're coming back next week to kind of explore that with you, it's not about them coming back to tell you whether they've been successful or not. It's about them coming back and doing that inquiry with you around what they noticed. So if they did it, great, they did it. What did they notice? If they didn't do it, it's just as useful to inquire with them what they noticed, what yucky stuff got in the way, and what did they do to avoid it. So either way, it's a win-win. And even if they completely forgot to do the commitment, it's like, wow, look, now you're noticing how easy it is to forget to do this stuff. So that's what we're doing, is we're building this noticing muscle with clients, so that they are able to see where they are on the matrix in those different quadrants, and start to kind of see their lives through that lens, which normalizes difficulty. It normalizes that we're all running around doing avoidance and distracting, and also that moving towards is really, really hard and takes a lot of effort. So I think I've kind of about covered that. I hope it was helpful. I hope it made sense. Like I said, you can watch this again if you want to. There's other webinars that I've got on um, Crowdcast. I do this every week as best as I can, so long as something hasn't happened with life. um, I've got a website, like I said, it's sueknightrecovery.co.uk. You can follow me on Facebook as well and Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel where I put all my best videos on. There's only one on there at the moment. This is fairly new to me. But yeah, I'm really grateful for those that have attended, and thank you for those that are watching the recording. And hopefully I will see you again in the coming weeks, if not next week. Thank you.